Nashville's skyline continues to grow. This city is probably most well known for its role in country music, but there's plenty of history here as well, especially when it concerns the Civil War. Let's talk about Fort Negley in general, just as far as just the history aspect of things first. What exactly happened here all those years ago?
I think one of the amazing stories that's overshadowed by the Battle of Nashville largely is the occupation of Nashville and just how important Nashville was as a shipping and staging hub for both the Union Army and the Confederacy. Unfortunately for the Confederacy, they did very little to fortify and defend Tennessee. So once the Battle of Fort Donelson took place in February 1862, and the Federal Army won, it opened the way to Nashville, which was really the gem of Tennessee. So within just a couple of weeks, the city of Nashville surrendered to federal troops. The Confederate Army, a force of about 7,000, moved out ahead of the Federal Army. And once the Union Army took control, they were tasked with securing this large area with a handful of troops. Federal troops were needed on the front lines, obviously, so they couldn't be here to guard Nashville. So in that case, you build large fortifications, as was taught at West Point at the time. So by the end of the war, Nashville was the second most fortified city outside of Washington, D.C. Wow. There were 5 major fortifications, 21 minor installations, and about 20 miles of earthworks encircling the city. So Fort Negley was the largest and most complex of the major fortifications built. There were 6 fortifications, actually, if you include the Capitol building, which was fortified and renamed Fort Andrew Johnson, where military governor Andrew Johnson spent the majority of the war. Fort Negley covers about 4 acres. It was built in a period of about 4 months, largely by African American runaway slaves called contrabands. When the Federal Army came to town, many slaves escaped from the local plantations and came to federal lines looking for protection from their owners. And the Federal Army saw an available labor force right on the sites where they were hoping to build fortifications. So about 2,700, men, women, and older children, usually over the age of 14 or so, built Fort Negley. They worked around the clock. They slept on the hillsides. I don't feel that we have all the records, but what we have is not very meticulous in the way of records as we think of today. So we don't know a whole lot about those laborers. We don't know a whole lot about how many died. A gentleman who came to Nashville after the fortifications were completed talked to people who were in charge of the contraband camps and who had been with the engineer department, and they estimated that between 600 and 800 people died, but we don't have any verification of that.
How incredible is it knowing that many people, I think you said 2,700, actually were responsible for building this?
I mean, it's amazing, and it's a huge undertaking, and to think about what they accomplished in 4 months. I mean, that really tells you a lot about the kind of pressure that people are under when it comes to war, and just how vital Nashville was to protect. The fort was only threatened on one occasion, November 5th, 1862. General Nathan Bedford Forrest got within about a mile and a half of the fort. The fort was still under construction. His troops were driven back. And a really interesting story about that episode is that the laborers went to federal troops here and asked for weapons because they were willing to defend themselves and the forts. When they were declined, they picked up their tools and they were ready to make a stand against about 1,000 cavalrymen.
Do we know who Negley was, who the fort's named after?
Yes, James S. Negley was the first post commander in Nashville. He was from Pittsburgh, and after the war, he went on to be a politician. I can't recall if he served in the Senate or the Congress, but he went on to be a politician and returned to Philadelphia.
So today, of course, we're standing in this wonderful lobby area of the Welcome Center. Talk about what you can see and hear, and if somebody's never been here before.
Sure. We have artifacts on display, a touchscreen exhibit on the construction of Fort Negley that also includes how artillery works. We have a link to the Soldiers and Sailors database, which is maintained by the National Park Service, and you can search for your Civil War ancestor. We have two 20-minute videos. One is on Fort Negley, and the other's on the surrender of Nashville in 1862.
After 2 days of fighting, the Union won its first major victory and turned its eyes toward Nashville.
And then we also have a third video that was produced by NPT during the sesquicentennial, and that covers the battles of Nashville and Franklin. We hold regular programs and events, lectures. We partner with other historical organizations such as Metro Historical Commission or Tennessee Historical Society to offer free programs. And then we have larger special events on the weekends as well.
And as far as outside, I mean, you can also visit the grounds outside as well, can you not?
Correct. The remains, the stonework of the fort remains on the hill, and we have about 20 interpretive panels for a self-guided walking tour. And usually during special events, we do offer guided tours with either staff or volunteers.
Do you ever have reenactments, like Civil War reenactments ever on this site?
Mm-hmm. We mainly have living history events. So we have federal soldiers encamped, and they portray what life would have been like at a garrison fort.
Overall, how impressive is it knowing that this city was so vital, I guess you could say, to the Union Army as far as just capturing Nashville and what it means to the history of our country?
I mean, it's extremely important. And I mean, when you think about Fort Negley is the largest inland masonry fort built in this country. And just the years of neglect that it has suffered, I mean, it's sad and it's frustrating because so few people recognize the history and the importance. For so long, the Western Theater has been overshadowed by what occurred in the Eastern Theater. And in Nashville, there's been such a focus on Music City that sometimes the history really gets lost.
So you'd like to see more of emphasis on the history versus maybe music always?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there can be a combination of the two. It's all heritage tourism. Sure. And we have people that come from all around the world because they know what Fort Negley is and that it's here, and they want to see it in person.
Currently, Fort Negley is open Tuesday through Friday from noon until 4 p.m. and on Saturday from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. The address is 1100 Fort Negley Boulevard in Nashville. Reporting from Davidson County, Barry Hyatt, NCTV.